Great to see you guys. Welcome to this week's sermon recap. I'm Kirk Bullis, the worship pastor, and it's my joy today to interview my good friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Barry Chesney, who preached yesterday at the Valleydale campus. Pastor Mac was still out of town until recently, although he said he really wanted to sit in between us today.
Pastor is back, thankfully. He had a good vacation, but we look forward to hearing from him next week. But we were in our strategy series, continuing the journey. And you did so well, two Sundays ago now, on worship.
Wow.
And so we had Connect and Serve were together, and I felt led to preach on serving.
I thought that was a good idea. You know, like Barry's our discipleship pastor, which means he's over the different adult ministries, life groups in particular. So, it would seem to follow that, Pastor Barry needs to preach on connecting. But I liked what you did, Pastor. You looked at the different the numbers of people involved. Well, it seems at Valleydale we've got a lot, percentage-wise, we've got a lot more involvement in our groups than we do with serving week to week. So you thought that this would be a timely message. But before we dive all the way into it, I want to tell you guys, remember, we've got a lot more resources besides this one. You need to get those, at the very least, you need to download that Valleydale app because everything's in there. We've even reorganized it a little bit recently, so now it's even easier to find all of our media resources. In the next couple of weeks, we've got the Parenting Today for Tomorrow, which is going to start up. Pastor Barry helped with that one as well. In the new year, we're going to have a praying podcast. And, who knows all the great other things that'll be coming in the next year. I don't even know.
I don't either, but it'll be good.
Who can discern where the wind of the Holy Spirit will blow? But let's jump into this text now. So, Pastor Barry, this is, you went to 1 Kings 19, which, the call of Elisha, a really helpful passage. I greatly appreciated your insight on it. How did the Spirit even bring you to this passage to preach on service?
Yeah, well, I got down to pray, and Elisha's name just came to mind, and I began looking at this passage. And I love the Old Testament. I love to preach the Old Testament, and I enjoy history, and so all of these kind of came together. And so. But what stood out to me, looking at the last sentence where it says, then he arose and went after Elisha and assisted him. And that word for assist means serve. And so that's where this, I felt like, made the connection back to serving. And really all of Elisha's life, leaving, just as we said yesterday, leaving the familiar, the comfortable for the unknown was just a real act of service.
It is a very appropriate passage, and I want to talk about that word for service in a minute, but let's take the passage a little bit more in order. You had 5 really great points, and I encourage all of our Valleydale faithful, and if you're out there in internet land, to listen to that message. It's posted in the podcast feed by now. You were able to get 5 excellent points of application. I think there's probably not enough time for us to go through all of them, but the first one really stuck out to me. You said we need to avoid over-commitment as we think about serving in the church. We need to avoid over-commitment as we think about serving in the church. Give me the Cliff's Notes of that one again, Barry.
Yeah, so really that came from Elijah's life. Elijah is on Mount Carmel. He's at Mount Sinai after Mount Carmel. He's discouraged. He's depressed. He's frustrated that he feels like, hey, I'm the only one left, and I'm fighting this spiritual battle against Baal, this false prophet. And then God just quietly and gently reassures him, hey, I want you to anoint these 3 other people. There's other people in this fight with you. And it just made me think, as if you're an overcommitted volunteer, you probably often feel like, man, I'm the only one doing this. I'd love to go be with my life group this Sunday. I'd love to go on vacation, but man, I've got to be here because somebody's got to be there. And so if you're in that place of overcommitment, it's frustrating. And, if you're serving weekly and God's called you to that, then you are happy and we're happy for you.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, because I think there's some people that they're really operating in their gifting when they serve more often. Because in the discipleship pathway that we're using, we're really only saying, hey, you need to serve at least once a month. But there's some people, they're like, I don't even feel like I'm participating unless I'm serving 3 or 4 times a month. What would you say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are people, I think of our adult life group leaders. I think of one gentleman
Sure.
who he'll put in 15 hours a week studying the lesson.
Wow.
And he loves it.
Yeah.
And we applaud that. He's got the time
Sure.
to do it. He's got the calling. And God's blessing his ministry. But there's others that don't have that same calling, and they've got busy families. They're traveling. They're engaged in the rhythm of life, and they don't have those type of hours. And so we want to say, hey, what if we all just shared responsibility for those of us who can? We understand some of you are at the season of life where you're not able to serve.
Sure,
It could be a physical limitation. Could be you're just at the place where you just can't. But, you have put in a lot of time in years before. But if you're physically able, we just say, hey, would you just go before the Lord and ask him, Lord, where would you have me to serve? Because we want you to serve at least one time a month.
Well, and I liked what you said in the message, because there's scientific evidence that says it's not just good for other people when you serve, but it's actually even good for you physically.
Yeah.
I thought that was talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was physical benefits such as, I want to say, was it related to dementia? Or I can't remember now. But
Well, it's almost like working out. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's a long term. It keeps you healthier knowing that you're giving time away. And then you said even like it just makes you feel like you have more time.
So it makes you feel like you have more time because you feel time affluent because you spent your time well. And then the second thing was you learn new skills. And then the third thing was it is helpful for your body, just even physiologically. There are benefits from volunteering.
I just thought that was so interesting because we use the old adage, "'Tis better to give than to receive," but then there's some biological, some scientific evidence that it really is just good for you. I like what you said. If you're physically able, just try to find a place to plug in. It's not as if a lot of these places are that physically demanding. Obviously, it can be tough. If you have to chase preschoolers, maybe you're not able to do that. But almost anybody can help with parking or greeting, that sort of thing.
And there's something that serving does about your own perspective. I think of when my wife was growing up. She said they would go. I believe it was on Thanksgiving Day, either Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve. They would go out into the community, like assisted living home, and just visit, just to serve. And that's not serving on campus in a church, but it was a way to say, hey, this day is not just about me. It's not just about my family. We want to serve someone else. And that just does something to our own spiritual perspective.
I guess on the flip side, would you say that the church in general is guilty of overcommitting some people, though? Like with all the extra, some people would say, like, if people are overcommitted in the church, maybe that's the church's fault for asking them to do too much. I get the sense that you have a good response to this.
Yeah, we do have a responsibility as church leaders. I think of Hebrews 13 where it says, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. So as spiritual leaders, we have to give an account for those who serve in the ministry. And so if we are aware that, this couple or this person is serving in multiple ministries, we have a spiritual responsibility.
Soul care.
I believe to say, hey, we're looking out for your souls. Is this too much for you to handle right now? Or, do you need to pull out from a couple of these? And the answer could be, no, I'm right where God's called me. It's going great. That's fine. But at least we are responsible. And if they are overcommitted, some of that, it falls on us that we've allowed it to happen.
That's a good pastoral note. I think I've noticed this in the music ministry. A lot of times the people that you see doing the most are the people you just assume they have it together and they're doing fine, when in reality, like, those are the people that are being a wonderful influence for the sake of the kingdom. They need to check in, and nobody truly has it all together. So that's my fault for thinking that. Couple other notes here. Last week I was preaching through the idea of worship and how that fits into a life lived on mission. And obviously, the funny thing is we entitled the message the same thing as what we say on the strategy map, which is worship weekly. Makes total sense. But if you as I was studying it, I'm like, obviously we were supposed to worship corporately in a regular fashion, but really all of life is a worshipful activity. And you pretty much just said the same thing, Pastor Barry, with regards to service. We need a total commitment to Jesus. This was your fourth point. And I loved what you said, that it's not so much that we're supposed to try harder as we follow Christ, but we're supposed to surrender more. Unpack that one just a little bit more.
Yeah, the try harder messages, they just leave us frustrated because we're already trying so hard in so many areas of life, and we think, oh, great, now I've got to try harder in my spiritual life. And there may be things we need to do in terms of spending time with the Lord, and that does take effort and discipline. But my point in this message was to surrender more, to saying, Lord, I just surrender to you. Just like Elisha is saying, I'm surrendering my future. I'm forgetting my past. I'm surrendering everything, saying, I'm going to follow Elijah, even though I don't know where he's taking me. Even there's so many uncertainties. And that's what I mean, just surrender. And when we surrender, God takes over. And we see, just as we read in Romans 8, that God graciously gives us all things. So when he meets us at that point of surrender, and he will say, okay, I'll take it from here. And that's where we learn to walk by faith and to trust him.
And that's how we can be sure that we can trust him in any way that he asks us to serve. That's a good segue into your fifth point, where you talked about how we shouldn't be afraid of or ashamed of menial tasks. Because when Elijah first led Elisha away to service, it wasn't to stand up and preach in front of the people. It was at first just to wash his hands. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, 2 Kings 3:11 talks about Elisha pouring water on the hands of Elijah. And, we often fast forward to the moments where Elisha's, raised someone from the dead, or he's, parting the Jordan River. And God used him to do many miracles. But those first, however many, whether it's years or months, it was a pretty menial task. And so you think there's a lot of menial tasks around the church that it's not, it's not on camera, it's not on the stage,
right.
But they're important, and they're ministering to children, and they're in a parking lot, or, they're with students behind and trying to minister to them, get to know them. And each one of those is important because the soul is important.
It is good to feed the soul with service. Let's finish up, well, I guess we're sort of where you finished up yesterday with the term that the Hebrew word of service there in verse 21, where it talks about what it meant for Elisha to serve Elijah. And unlike what sort of the Paulian theology of the New Testament, where Paul always calls himself a slave of Christ over and over, I'm a doulos, slave of Christ. This is not a word that would apply to slaves. This was something a little different. Talk about that.
Yeah, so the word referred to a free person who always served a superior. So the service was out of freedom. Hey, I'm not under any obligation to serve, but I'm serving you because I want to and because I view you as my superior. So it was used of Joshua as he was Moses' assistant. It was used of Samuel as he served the Lord early. And remember, after his mom left him there with not Saul, but Eli. Anyway, and so it's serving a superior. So when God has saved us, we're free, just as we sang yesterday morning before the message. So, and out of that freedom, we have a sense to say, God, you're my superior. I'm not your equal. You're my superior, and I'm just here to serve you because I love you and I worship you.
That's beautiful. Free to be slaves to Christ. Yet another one of those mysterious tensions that we observe as we follow our Lord. Pastor Barry, thanks again for preaching for us yesterday. Thanks for pastoring the people. And church, as you're listening, feel free to pray for us. Like Pastor Barry was saying, we have a responsibility to help the people serve and to get involved in the right way. And rest assured that we are praying for each one of you, that you'll get involved right where the Lord has gifted you. May you be involved in your church in such a way that it never burns you out. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say there's still time to respond.
Oh, good point.
If you thought, well, I really wanted to yesterday, or hey, I've been thinking about it, and if you go to our website, valleydale.org, at the very top, there's a serve link, as you can see behind us, and then there's on the Valleydale app at the top there. So we've had a number of people respond and said, hey, I'm interested in serving. And so it'll be our joy just to follow up with you and try to get you connected in the right place where you'll be a great fit.
That's our hope for you. Thanks for tuning in to this week's sermon recap, and we'll see you again soon.